Make some noise. Hadithi.
We've got an ultimate speaker, storyteller for today. I've always to say ultimate because, English. So she will be the last speaker for the day. What do I say? That thing that not the least. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. Last but not least, some of us learn English in Xhosa. But I will say she is the cherry on top. I've never met someone so quiet in a being. You see her and you don't want to disturb her space. You'd be like, is it okay to say hi? Because you feel like you're going to disturb the position that she's busy with. And it's like, hey dude, can you see I'm being alive here? Why are you entering this? So, I'm just saying, guys. So I had to ask, can I say hi? Because I wanted her to come and tell us how she got to be so quiet and comfortable in a space. It does turn out that there's challenges in getting there. And today she's going to give us a picture, an image, a window into what it takes to be her. But I can promise you what you see her here today is a strong woman. But it takes the journey as you have heard today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last storyteller of the evening. So with every Hadithi Joe you've got, even the one you saved for later, or tomorrow in evening dinner, please bring it out. Please help me welcome Lungile Hlathwayo with a Hadithi Lungile, right to the stage, ladies and gentlemen. Good thing. That's her right there.
I laid there on the top, with my head down on the ground and cars driving on the top of my head, close enough to crush my skull. My voice, well, I don't know where my voice was, because seemingly no one heard my voice. Maybe it's because I was at the corner of Main Street and Gandhi Square. I was at a capello. Ten years ago, two years into the 10 years, I was 22. And I was in love. I fell in love after I dropped out of my psychology studies and decided to find myself my first job. I landed up in a job where I met a lover. Look, the lover didn't give anyone a chance. We met at induction. Once we hit the office floors, it was too late for everybody. I was already marked Lungile Mr. X. It was lovely. We loved it. His and hers Timberlands, his and hers fragrances. We even job hopped together. Look, At some point, I was no longer Lungile Hlathwayo. Lungile, Mr. X. We were in love. We'd spend all of our weekends together. It was so bad that at some point it began to give my mother a heartbreak. I'd leave on a Friday for work, be back on the Sunday, sometimes the Monday, other times a Tuesday. I was a rebellious young girl. I'd come back home and know I'd need to give my mother an apology. I'd walk in slowly into her bedroom and say, "Ask Kisi, Mama." And I'd tell her some long story about a friend of a friend and their relatives and whatever other couldn't come up. And she'd say to me, she'd actually keep herself very preoccupied, as if not giving me any attention. And eventually she'd say to me, "I need to shut this in." Meaning, I had gone out of my way to get myself married to somebody. I was officially somebody else's wife, except they just didn't know it or approve it. And this was who I was and how we do it, and I'd do it over and over again. And I really wanted to stop, you know. We really did, even with him, but we just couldn't stay away. Oh, no, guys. He had a room in his mother's backyard, Mfulo Soweto, behind Kwezi Station. We had our little safe haven there. All of our weekends would be there. And of course, this was also the place of my first times. So he was that guy. And this relationship went on in this heavenly sense for a good 2 years. One day, after a day at work, we decided with a couple of colleagues of mine that we'd walk down from Diagonal Street. There's a building called Life Center. And we'd walk down from there and go to Main Street to go to Gandhi Square Capello. It was the normal thing. We'd do it every now and again on Fridays. Me and Mr. X had decided we'd meet there. He was knocking off an hour later, and this was around 11 p.m. The latest time to knock off was 11 a.m. No, I'm right, p.m. And he was going to knock off midnight. So we were at Capello with our colleagues sitting there. And then he shows up. He shows up and he does the strangest thing I've never seen before. He comes towards me. He grabs me by my clothes. He throws me on the floor. He lashes me with beatings on my face. Everybody comes up to try and help. The bouncers get him off me. He gets out of the way as my colleague girlfriends pick me up. We go to the bathroom. I'm confused. I'm crying. And all I could hear is the girl saying, "What's wrong with him? What's going on with him?" And I just couldn't think. I was so confused. Eventually, I gathered myself and stubbornly walked out towards him when everyone was saying, "Leave him for a while." I said, "No, that's That's my man. I want to know what's going on. So I walk over to him. And just as I do, in a split second, I was on the floor. The Timberland was on my neck. I was on the streets of Joburg with cars passing the top of my head, about to crush my skull. I'm screaming, but no one's coming for me. Maybe because I'm at Capello Gandhi Square and people were out there in the noise. Eventually, again, I picked myself up. And that night ends. But this became my life. This became my everyday. I remember being held by his aggressive hands by my head and smashing me against the wall 3 times consecutively. I remember that I looked like a little alien. My forehead had enlarged and had a cut. I remember that I had to stay indoors in our little haven until I healed. This meant my family didn't know where I was. My friends didn't know where I was. I remember being kicked in a street corner because I found him with another lover. I remember finding the other lover and asking her, "Does he hit you?" She said, "No." I remember my heart breaking down into pieces. I remember asking myself, then why me? I remember being thrown into furniture and leaving the places in ruins. I remember breathing heavily in a corner because I was trying to fight back. I remember being locked in for days. I remember needing to arrange doctor's notes through a hood doctor who knew a friend of a friend and could explain why I wasn't at work for 5 days or more. You see, I was never the kind of girl that would leave. I was waiting to be left. But abusers don't leave. They stay. So I remember one day living in this mess and thinking to myself, you know that feeling that on a bad day you say, I wish I could go far, far away. I wish I could go somewhere where nobody knows me. I wish I could just disappear off for a while. No, I don't want to die. I just want to go and live somewhere else. I just want to go. I just want to go. I just want to leave this whole mess and not own it. It's not mine. I couldn't leave him. One day in the office, I was on a call with a colleague from Cape Town. I was doing something particular in the office that a lot of people couldn't do. And so I remember speaking to her on the phone and I said to her, you guys could really do with somebody because you guys keep me quite busy. And I remember myself and this girl, speaking to management about that actually being something that could happen. Management came back to me and said, look, you're a contractor, we can't afford transfer costs and so on. I said, no, it's fine, I'll take it. 2-3 days, done. I was leaving. I was leaving him. I wasn't just leaving Joburg, I was leaving him. I left for Cape Town. I left for Cape Town and arrived at the Cape Town airport. It was definitely not one of those prestigious arrivals you guys usually have. My budget was tight. Can't get a maxi taxi. Have to find a way to get to a taxi. And eventually find the place that I Googled. So I do get to the taxis. The strangest place is Cape Town. I know nobody, absolutely nobody. And I get there and it's hideous. People are jumping out of taxis, opening doors, Cape Town, everywhere. I'm going to Belleville, sir. Cape Town, everywhere. It was strange. I just kept asking myself, what have you done? I remember arriving in Belleville at the place called Central Square, and when I got there and I looked at the post that I had seen on the internet, and I looked at the place, and I was very impressed. It looked exactly like it was in the picture. And so I got into my lovely new place. It was a matchbox looking like loft apartment. I was very happy with that. I didn't have any money to occupy it with furniture anyway. In fact, I had slept on air beds for the longest time, and they just kept getting popped in by something, and I'd land up on the floor. But I just kept buying different brands because I couldn't afford a bed. I lived next door to a garage, opposite a bottle store, next door Debonniers. Yes, there was plenty. There was enough to get me going. And so my work day started, and things were great. I was doing great. Except every night I lived on a bottle of wine that cost me 12 rand. Every night, a bottle of wine for 12 rands. 2 sleeping tablets and boxes of cigarettes. And so I was in this great place of depression and isolation. But it was fine because nobody could see anything because nobody knew me. And so I'd go back and forth at work. One day, I'm sitting in the office and I am told somebody's looking for me. I'm thinking it's a customer, so I step out. And as I step out, I see Mr. X. My heart was pounding, my knees were shaking. I wasn't sure if I could handle my body. I was expecting to see myself drop down on the floor. I wasn't sure I could take another step towards him without drawing too much attention to the people around. I was shivering everywhere on the inside. I gathered myself to walk towards him and I said, "What are you doing here?" He said to me, "I came for you. I left everything. I came for you." I stood there in silence, too afraid, too nervous. It was messy. He said to me, I'm sitting upstairs. He was referring to a Spur restaurant. He said, "Can we talk?" I said, "I'll see you later." I went back into the office. I called a friend. I said, "Friend, he's here." "Who?" "Mr. X." What? What is he doing there? Don't go anywhere near him. Call the police. As this conversation of concern continued, I deliberated with myself, and as it was home time, I headed to him. And as I walked into the door of the restaurant, there he was, Mr. X, with a glass of beer in front of him and 2 huge bags. And so I sat next to him, and he began to tell me how sorry he is. He began to tell me how much he loved me, how much he left his family and his friends and his job. He's here because he's here for me, and he wants to fix things because he's made the biggest mistake of his life, and he's here because he's fixing it. I remember in the end of all this, he was saying, he said, I saw a backpackers as I was coming. I mean, if there's really no place for me, I'll spend the night at the backpackers that I saw in town. And I remember that line being the line that made me take back my abuser to my Matchbox loft apartment. And so we left Belleville. And so we lived it all over again. Here I was in Cape Town experiencing Johannesburg. I remember there was a time I came back home. I decided to come home for holidays. And as I came back, my neighbor, in a greeting, said to me, "Oh, were you away?" I said, "Yes." He said to me, "Oh, I thought you were around because I saw some ladies around." I'm like, "Oh, no, I was away. I was at home." And so, obviously, that created some ideas. And I remember that night, I dug in for his phone just to affirm some of my thoughts. And as always, I was right. I mean, this guy had landed himself a job in 2 weeks of being in Cape Town. He was a well-recommended guy. But it seemed he was also now very well known in Cape Town. So I waited until the morning, and in the morning I said to him, "I think you are very well acquainted with Cape Town now. I think it's okay. It's okay to let you go, And as this conversation continued, he discovered that he was now caught again with another lover. And I remember this conversation getting so aggressive, and before I knew it, I was being thrown down the stairs of my loft as my head hit the bars of the balcony. And I remember my thoughts. I remember that I said to myself, there is no way my mother is going to receive my body in a body bag. No way. And so I screamed across the sliding door, crying for help, as I turned back and watched him in that fierce face I first saw at a capello. I saw him coming towards me to give me more. I screamed and I screamed. Eventually, in all of that, he reached me, he carried on, but he realized that I had drawn some attention to some neighbors who happened to be policewomen, lesbian policewomen. Remember? Yes. Cape Town. Yeah, I know. We need more of those. And they came through, and they came around the one gate, and I remember he ran and exited on another gate. And that was it. He was gone, and they asked me, "Do you want to open a case?" I said, "No." "Restraining order?" I said, "Okay." So we had a restraining order. He was gone. At some point, he came to get his clothes. He left. And that was that. And so I lived the rest of my probably another year in Cape Town, still in this isolation and this depression, now needing to recover from the Joburg, Cape Town experience I just had all over again. And eventually I got to experience some beautiful days of the beautiful city of Cape Town. Eventually I settled into meeting a couple of people. Eventually I really enjoyed my stay in Cape Town. After approximately, it was 4 years, 3.5 to be exact, I decided to go back and come back to Joburg. And I remember getting a call from him sometime, I must have been around 2017. Well, getting a call from a number I didn't know. And I remember answering and he said to me, "It's Mr. X. I really want to apologize about my foolish young acts as a boy. I realize that I was a boy. And in fact, I've got no reason why I did the things that I did. I could never tell you why I did everything that I did to you, but I can tell you you didn't deserve it. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just a young boy." I listened to this for about 30 minutes. And at the end of this call, I knew that if I didn't accept this apology, the burden would be on me. Because it was sincere. And I said, okay. And from that day forward, it was gone. He was forgiven. 2018, on the 6th of February, I got a call that Mr. X had collapsed and passed away. And he was still living in Cape Town. I learned that he had a child in Cape Town. I learned that the child was married with the girls that were playing around while I was on holiday to see my mother at home, or while I had come home. I learned that this baby was conceived in my bed. But Mr. X had passed away. I remember going to see the mother, and I remember her looking at me and saying, "He came for you. It was you, he came for you." I remember feeling so heavy because the whole family kept saying, "He left and came to Cape Town because he came for you." And so it made it feel like there was a burden for me to carry in this very moment, but I was already so shattered. I had loved this man so much, and he had broken me down into so many pieces, but I had loved him, and in this moment it felt like I just loved him so much more. It felt like I understood him so much more. I sat down with the mother of his child that was conceived in Cape Town on my bed. And we spoke about what actually transpired. How she came to my apartment and I was at home, and she discovered later I existed, and then discovered there was a baby. And I also learned that they had a relationship which turned out to be exactly like the one we had. And eventually they had to part because she was being abused. I remember us being able to have a conversation where we could finish each other's sentences of emotion because we understood each other on that level. We are now co-parents to a little boy by the name of Kagiso. We decided we will work this situation to the best of our ability. And with the love that I carried for this abuser in my life, I wanted to continue loving his son. And so we've continued having a relationship. And we have conversations, we have video calls, and they are in Cape Town and I'm here. What I've learned from all of this is to forgive while people are alive. When death eventually comes, you no longer see the terrible things about a person. When the death is here, I would not have recognized him as an abuser. When the death arrived, he was now all over again a lover and no longer an abuser. I've learned to forgive while you are alive. Forgive the people that do you wrong while you are alive. Rest in peace, Tami Kalanya.